Welcome to Stickbagger's YouTube channel. I'm Steve, and today I'm going to be talking to you about blacking out your bike. Powder coating all of your chrome parts, making them whatever color black or whatever color powder coat that you want. And there's a variety of flavors out there that you can get as far as colors. But on the 2015 Road Glide back here, as most of you guys know, that we went a different route than the Street Glide. We're going to black this one out, which goes completely against every bone in my body. I'm a chrome guy, guys. The first build that we did, the 14 Street Glide over there, is covered in chrome. But this time I wanted to do something a little bit different, and we're going to be blacking out the bike. So Christmas Day, I came out here, full-blown bronchitis, came out here, spent about 7 hours stripping down the Road Glide, and I didn't make a video of it. I was sick, I felt like crap, I just wanted to get the parts off and get them over to powder coat. I wasn't really going to shoot a video of putting this stuff back on the bike, but my wife suggested to me to go ahead and do it. We threw it out on the Facebook forum and over on Instagram to see if anybody was interested in watching a video of us putting it back together. I got a pretty positive response from everybody, but before we actually start putting the parts on the bike, I want to touch base with a few things with you guys, things that you may not have thought about already. So if I can get this guy to shut the hell up for a minute, I'm going to jump in here real quick, and I'm in the house editing today, guys, and this is going to be like one super long boring ass video. So we're talking like 40-45 minutes long for me to cover all of the stuff that we did to the Road Glide back here. So what I'm going to do is break this up into two parts for you guys. This part one is going to cover all of the little covers: primary, derby, transmission, cam, all that good stuff, rear fender. And then part two is going to cover, of course, the floorboard mounts, the shifters, brake arm, and rocker boxes. So pretty important stuff in that video. As soon as I get that video uploaded, I'll put a link down in the description down below, so click that link to make sure you check out part two. This is going to be the chrome to black powder coating series on the Whiskey project back here. So just make sure that you check out the other video, and as soon as I have it uploaded, of course, I'll post it on Instagram and Facebook, but it'll also be down in the description down below, so make sure to click that link and check it out. I'm going to get out of here and let you get back to this. Most of this stuff can be done on the Jiffy Stand, guys. It's better if you have a jack, a motorcycle jack, at least a motorcycle jack. It's even better if you've got a lift table, but you can do this on the Jiffy Stand unless, of course, you're pulling the Jiffy Stand to take it off and get it powder coated. Some of the things you're going to want to think about up front real quick. Some of the parts on the other side of the bike, on the exhaust side of the bike, you can't really get to those parts unless you pull the exhaust. So even if you already have blacked out exhaust and you don't think that you need to remove it, just something like removing the brake pedal, depending on what kind of headers you have, you may have to pull the exhaust. So go over the bike and think ahead of the parts that you want to take off. As you're going around the bike and pulling gaskets, write them down. Write down the gaskets that you need, so when you get to wherever you're going to get your gaskets, you don't forget anything. Ziploc freezer bags. These things are going to be your best friend when you get ready to put this bike back together. If you just take all these bolts out, and some of them you can put back in the holes where you pulled them out, that's fine. You can do it that way. It just seems kind of monotonous to me. You put the bolts back in, and when you get ready to put the parts back on, you're pulling the bolts back out again. It's too time consuming. Pull them out, put them in a Ziploc bag, mark the Ziploc bag with what's in there. When you get done, you're going to have a butt ton of these things marked. When you get ready to put that part back on, find the bag and you know what bolts go in that part. Get your cell phone out and take pictures, guys. Some of these covers may have multiple size bolts in there. And you get ready to put it back together and you can't remember if the long ones went in the front and the short ones went in the back or whatever. Pull those bolts out, leave them hanging out just a little bit, snap a picture of it. That way you know. You can always refer back to your phone. Permatex gasket remover. Stuff's about $12, $13 a bottle at your auto parts store. But I've done 2 Road Glides with this bottle and barely used any. This stuff will last me forever. Plastic scraper. Don't put metal on any machined edges. If you got gaskets left over after you pull your rocker boxes off, go ahead and thinly spread this on to the gasket area. Let it set about 10 minutes. Come back with this little plastic scraper, gently start scraping it off. Get a couple of rags and wipe off. Don't let anything fall down into the cylinder, of course. Remember that when you're powder coating, this stuff has to go into an oven. So make sure that you inspect your parts when you pull them to make sure there's no rubber or plastic left on the parts. So you're going to want to pull off the rubber that's on there, and if you got any plastic bushings or anything like that, go ahead and knock those out. When you get ready to put this stuff back together, of course, your plastic bushings usually you just push in, but your rubber stuff, you may have to glue back on. Prime example of that is my shifter pegs. It had rubber inserts on them. They were glued in, so I need to peel those off, get the old glue off. And what I use is this 3M black super weather strip adhesive. You can pick this up at Walmart, auto parts stores, $5 or $6. This stuff is sticky. While you have all of these parts off and you got them over to powder, generally you got a week or two wait depending on who your powder coater is. Get in here and clean all this stuff up. When I pulled that kickstand off, it was just caked in grease and road grime. Get you a plastic toothbrush, get in there. I use a stuff called Awesome. Literally, you can buy this stuff at like the Dollar General store for $1 a bottle. Spray that stuff in there, let it soak for a minute, agitate it with the brush, go back in with a towel and wipe it out. It makes no sense to me to have all these brand new black shiny parts and I get them back from powder coat and I'm gonna stick them back on a filthy bike when I've literally had like a week, maybe 2, to get in here and clean all this stuff up. It's a good time to go ahead and address the wrinkle black on the motor. There's several products on the market. We did a video. I'll put the link down in the description. We compared the S100, the pig spit, and the Harley Davidson engine brightener. Go ahead and dress all of that while you got this apart. So when you get your parts back, you're pretty much going to have a brand new bike after you put it back together. Trust me, you'll feel better about it. Lots of shop towels, just paper shop towels if you want, old waxing towels that you may have laying around. If you don't, go to Walmart or the dollar store and pick them up. These things are going to be garbage when you get done with this, so definitely not something you want to throw in the washing machine covered in oil. Trying to think if there's anything else we need to cover, guys. Oh, one more thing. When I take my rocker boxes apart, what I like to do is get a piece of cardboard and cut slots in the cardboard and push the bolts through. As you can see right here, the bolts are pushed through and it's marked front, left, right. That way you know you're putting the bolts back in the same holes that they came out of. Some of these are shorter, some of them are longer, so it's very specific where you put these back. So unless you take a picture like I talked about and you just throw them into a bag when you get ready to put these back together, you're going to have to refer to your service manual to know where these bolts go. But if you put them in a piece of cardboard like this, you're good to go. You're going to know every time. Speaking of service manuals, I've covered this in a few videos. If you're going to do this, please get a service manual. You can buy a hardcover, which costs a lot of money, or you can go online and usually download a PDF for 10 to 15 bucks. And there's also some sketchy places online where you can actually pick them up for free. But definitely, however you decide to get it, definitely get a service manual. Most of these parts are going to go on pretty quick, guys. I'll give you the torque specs. I'll give you the torque sequences if there is one. When we get to the rocker boxes, that's when I'm going to stop and really break it down for you. That's the most important part, that you got to make sure certain things are in a certain place before you pull them and when you put them back on. So we're going to get the camera over here to the back of the bike and start with the rear fender. Like I said, we've got the heat turned up way too much in here, so losing all this garb, and we're going to get the rear fender on and then we'll work our way forward. So basically from here, guys, I'm going to go ahead and put my fender support brackets on. The bottom of this goes to the bottom of your saddlebag rail right here. You've got 2 bolts. You've got a couple of bolts that go in here. This is for your 4-point docking system, and this bolt actually holds this on to the frame. The biggest pain in the butt part about this is the little air rides thing here. If you've got the 2014 that's got the air over oil shocks, you're going to have this little thing here to deal with. And when you put the fender back in, you got to make sure this is over the fender and not under it. If you've got the coil shocks, you don't have to worry about this. You probably still have this piece, but it's just not used. Quick note on the back of these: when you're getting these ready for powder, flip them over, because there's a rubber square piece right here. It's a cushion, and it keeps your fender from rubbing on the metal. You have one on both sides. Peel them off, send them to powder, get them back, glue them back on with that 3M glue that I showed you. In an upcoming video, we will be replacing the shocks, but right now we just want to get everything back to stock. I'm going to leave this loose and go ahead and do the other side. It makes it a lot easier to get the fender and stuff back on with all of this loose, and then we'll button it up in the bottom. These two bolts down here in the bottom of your saddlebag bracket, those are going to be 30 to 37 foot-pounds, and these bolts up here are going to be 15 to 20 foot-pounds. Once we had that, we can put our wire harness clips back in the fender strut. Wire harness back through for our tri-bar light. Plug our tri-bar light back in. Put our tri-bar light cover back on. We're going to wave forward to some more easy stuff, the horn. The horn is pretty simple to do. The one thing that you want to make sure that you don't do is over tighten this nut back here. If you over tighten this, you're going to squeeze the plastic components and your horn's going to sound like a Honda Civic. So don't do that. Put your horn in, make sure the horn is pointing down, put the bolt through. I don't put any torque specs on this. I just tighten it down snug. Make sure the horn doesn't turn when you're tightening it down. Do not over tighten that. Once you have the horn in, you've got these two holes and you've got these clips. Make sure the nut side of the clip is pointing towards the horn. You slide those back on just like that. Once you have the clips on, you got your horn mounting bracket. This little indent goes towards the motor, so that goes just like that. So you want to just kind of eyeball it up, set it on there, put your bolts back in, get them started. The top one has this little wire loom clip, so you want to put that on there, then put your bolt in. It's going to hold the wire up out of the way. If you've taken this horn bracket off the cylinder heads, you're going to want to put these back on at 35 to 40 foot-pounds. And then you just simply plug it back in. Now you're ready to mount it. You run this rubber wire up through this little loom here that kind of keeps it tucked behind the horn bracket, and then put it back on. You've got a washer and an acorn nut. The acorn nut is 80 to 120 inch-pounds. I don't really put a torque wrench on this, guys. It's a horn. Snug that thing down tight and you should be good to go. Now we're going to move down to the Jiffy Stand. This is pretty easy to do. A lot of guys get intimidated by this spring. So with the newer Jiffy Stand style, the way this is set up, the spring is easy to take off and put back on. The old school way, man, we used to have to pull these apart and jam pennies in between these links to spread the spring, put it on, start pulling your pennies out. Big pain in the butt. But this is very easy to do, so don't get intimidated by the spring. I'll show you how this goes back together. You've got your Jiffy Stand bracket, and it just goes on right here. And right now, for now, because we're not doing the floorboards, I'll just go ahead and put these two bolts in here. Got these bolts. I like to just go ahead and put a little blue Loctite on each one of those. Really don't want that kickstand coming off. And go ahead and get these two started, and then we can actually mount our Jiffy Stand. While doing the Jiffy Stand, the service manual says to go ahead and mount your temporarily mount your floorboards, which I'll address that later when I'm actually doing my floorboards. But for right now, we'll go ahead and tighten these down to spec, and then we'll deal with the floorboards later. These two bolts are 36 to 42 foot-pounds. On the back side of this, right at the bottom, you've got a little hole. You're going to go ahead and put your spring in just like that and let it hang. On this piece here, because all of this has been sandblasted, you want to go ahead and lube this back up with some anti-seize lube, whatever you want to put on there, guys. You can put the actual anti-seize on there. I use Lucas red and tacky, just stuff that we have in the garage. It works really good. Then from here it gets pretty critical to how you put this piece back on. This is before powder coating. It'll say bottom side on this. After you get it powder coated, you probably just see a little bit of an indent there. So make sure that you put that bottom side down. Pretty much when the kickstand is in the down position, this piece is going to be up and it's going to hit this strike plate right here. That's what stops it from going any farther forward. So before we put that on, we want to make sure that we put our spring on. You're just going to roll the kickstand forward. You're going to hook the spring just like that. and then you can roll it back. So when this goes on, you can see it's square, so obviously it can go in 4 different directions. Put the bottom down, and then when this is in its resting position, this is going to be up towards the top. This is one of those things that you may want to take a picture of. This part here is going to hit this strike plate, and that's what keeps it from going forward. So we know that it goes right there. You can get it down most of the way. Go ahead and get your bolt in, and it'll pull it down the rest of the way. But you got a couple of washers on here. Of course, the flat washer goes first up against this, then your split washer, your bolt. Like I said, we can actually use this to pull that the rest of the way on. Before it's powder coated, that piece comes off and goes on very easy. But with the powder coat, of course, you've got a little bit thicker on there. So you may have to tap it on or use your bolt to actually pull that piece back down on there. So see, when we let go, it's in its resting position. That's where the kickstand goes. Also, when you're taking your kickstand off for powder coat, you've got a rubber bumper right here that goes up and hits the frame. Make sure that you pull that out. A lot of time these things break. So if it breaks when you're ordering your gaskets and stuff like that, get one of those on order. Honestly, in the service manual, I could not find any torque specs for this bolt. So basically, we're just going to put a little on it and then hit it with a little more to make sure it doesn't come off. Got a couple of on there, and I don't think that Jiffy stand is going to be going anywhere. Well, now we're going to move down to the primary chain case cover. This is a pretty easy install. There's torque specs and of course a torque sequence for all of these bolts. So I'll put them up on the screen. Before I actually torque them down, I'll show you the torque sequence with the numbers on there, and then of course you can just pause the video if you need to write it down or whatever. Once you make sure that everything is clean, get a new gasket. Get a brand new gasket. And as you can see here, there's a hole here and a hole here, and you've got these little aluminum studs that kind of come out around the bolt holes, and that's how you keep the gasket on in place. So you can see I'm going to put it over that one. I'm going to put it over that one. So that keeps the gasket in place until you get the outer cover on. You've got 4 long bolts that go in the front here, and you have 9 of the short bolts that go around the back. Service manual says to add a drop of blue Loctite on each one of the bolts. So I'll get 1 long one and 1 short one ready. You can go ahead and prepare all of them on your bench if you want to. I've got that one ready to go. Put it on smoothly, just like that, and I'll go ahead and start one of the long ones in the top here. It'll help me hold everything. Pick one of these back ones back here. Go ahead and get that one started. So you've got long ones up here, and this is another thing, guys, that you may want to take a picture of or write down if you don't have the service manual. Now from here, you're going to torque these to 12 to 13 foot-pounds, and it's going to be in a certain sequence. Here's a picture straight from the service manual, so you can see the sequence of the bolts and how you want to tighten them down. So that's pretty much it from there. I'm going to save the derby cover for later because we still need to add the fluids to the bike, and that's going to be one of the last things that I do. So we'll come back around later because this is where our primary oil is going to have to go in. So there's no sense in putting that cover on just yet. So we'll save that. Okay guys, so now we've moved over to the cam cover, which is also very easy to install, but just like the primary cover, it does have a gasket. You're going to want to pick this gasket up. Don't reuse the gasket that was on there. Very simple. Once again, on all of the bolts, we're going to put blue Loctite on those. So we have all of our bolts ready to go in. Blue Loctite ready. And get our gasket up on there. I'll put the cover on and just start with one of the top ones. Go ahead and run it through. Make sure that you're not pinching the gasket. Go ahead and get it started. And then I'll take one of the bottom ones, making sure that I'm going through the gasket. Now from here, guys, I'll go ahead and run these in just to save some time, but I'm just going to get them to where they touch and not snug them down because we're going to want to torque these down. Now here's a picture of the torque sequence straight from the service manual. You could pause the video here and jot these down if you wanted to, or just refer back to the video. But we're gonna go ahead and torque these down in this sequence. Now with the remaining cam cover, there's no gasket, there's no fluid back here. So you want to just put that back on, put your bolts back in. There's really no torque sequence to this. Just kind of do a star pattern, blue Loctite, and be done with it. So from here, we're going to move on to the outer transmission cover, which goes on right here. Same thing on this one, blue Loctite, 90 to 120 inch-pounds. Just put the cover on, put your bolts in, and run them in. Now we're going to move to the transmission top cover. This is another prime example of looking over your parts before you take them to the powder coater. A little rubber breather hose here goes in this hole. On the back side of this, it just has a little flange on it. So when you're taking it out, you can use a little flathead screwdriver and just kind of push that down and it'll pull right out. And putting it back in, you just simply feed it back through the hole and then pull it through until it's locked into place. Looks like this when you're done. Once again, this one does have fluid underneath it, so you're going to need a new gasket. This is another gasket that you're going to need. Make sure your surface areas are clean. Of course, your bolts are going to need some blue Loctite. We're going to torque these down to 132 to 156 inch-pounds. Now, once we made sure our gasket area is clean, we're going to set our gasket in and take our top cover and just kind of gently lay it in. You're going to have to watch getting all of this lined up. Blue Loctite on the bolt. Make sure that you're going through the part, through the gasket. Set that into place. Go ahead and screw that one in. Once you get your second one in, you know that you're lined up. So I just do the front side, lift it, make sure I'm going through the gasket into the hole, not pinching the gasket. Now you know the rest of it's pretty well lined up. So what I'll do is run these in, and of course I don't really have anything to get torque on these front two up here, so I'll torque these down with my torque wrench, kind of get a feel for what you're doing, and then you know how much pressure really gets you in the ballpark on these front two. I don't really have anything to get my torque wrench in there to get those very good, so just do these first, do those last, just kind of get a feel for it and try to get in the ballpark there. Just kind of run these in until they touch. I knew right there it took quite a bit of pressure. So I'll kind of remember that. So that took a little bit of pressure. Kind of remember that doing these. So when you get in here with your Allen wrench to tighten these down, you got an idea. Your starter cover, if you pull this off, there's nothing behind it. You can just simply remove the screw and take this out. When you get ready to put it back on, same thing, little blue Loctite, run the bolt back in. It's 90 to 110 inch-pounds on that. Not much more else to that. So we're pretty much going to end part one right there at the starter cover. We'll pick up part two, I think, with the floorboards and the shifter and all that good stuff. So stay tuned for that video, guys. I still have to edit it. There's like 86 clips to go through that we recorded in the last 3 days of putting all this stuff back on. It was a lot more time consuming than what I thought it was going to be. And thanks for humoring me on part one and part two, just so I didn't have a 45-minute long boring ass video. Stay tuned for part two. We'll pick up on the rest of the bike. And as soon as I have it uploaded on YouTube, I will put the link down in the description. Thank you guys once again. If you liked the video, if any of this helped you, please hit that like button and please hit that subscribe button. That's what gets us out here and allows us to make these videos for you. I'm going to get out of here and get back in there to editing, but stay tuned for part two. And as always, be safe and keep your knees in the breeze. Thanks for checking out the YouTube video, guys. If you like what you see, make sure you hit the subscribe button over here. Over 100 bagger related videos on our YouTube channel. But to get you started, maybe you can check out this one or this one. Just one of them. Not really going to say anything else. Just click the button, man. No, just